They say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you about a breakfast the disciples had one morning that truly was the most important meal of that day. It's a story that's told to us in the final chapter of the Gospel of John. It's a story of the disciples having breakfast in Galilee with Jesus. At the Last Supper, Jesus told his apostles, "After I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you. I'll meet you in Galilee." When the women came and found the tomb empty, the angels said to them, "Go quickly, tell his disciples that he's risen from the dead and that he's going ahead of you. He'll meet you in Galilee." When the women later returned to the tomb and saw Jesus himself alive, Jesus said to them, "Go and tell my brethren to leave and go to Galilee, and that's where they will see me." I'm getting the distinct impression that Jesus expected the apostles to leave Jerusalem and go north to Galilee. Well, it took about a couple of weeks after Easter Sunday, but they did make their way up to Galilee. And as they're there in Galilee, they waited for Jesus to appear as he had promised. We're told that they were near the Sea of Tiberias, or as you and I typically call it, the Sea of Galilee. They're waiting, and one evening Peter says, "I'm going to go fishing." Now, of course, that was his vocation before he became a disciple of Jesus, a fisherman. It's something he knew, perhaps something he enjoyed. And so he says, "I'm going back to fishing." Now, some preachers have read that text. Next thing you know, they're preaching about Peter, and he's slipping. He's thinking of leaving Christ and leaving the ministry. No. He's just getting bored. He's sitting around waiting. He decides, "I'm going to go fish some while I'm waiting." And it's evening time. It's going to be nighttime fishing. My way of looking at it, that's after business hours. He ought to be able to go fish a little bit if he wants to. And so he did. There were 7 disciples that decided to go fishing that evening. Simon Peter, and then Thomas and Nathaniel. There's 3 of the apostles. We got 2 more apostles, the sons of Zebedee. That's James and John. And then we have 2 unnamed disciples. The 7 of them got in a boat. They fished all night, and we're told, caught nothing. Been there, done that. All of us who've done any fishing. So, bad night, but still, they're doing something. They've released some tension. They've had a chance to relax. Now, on the shore is a stranger, at least somebody they can't recognize. Now, we're told in the text it was Jesus, but they didn't know that it was the Lord Jesus. Now, how come they can't tell? First, I remind you that as they're seeing Jesus on the shore, the text says that the day was now breaking. It's early morning dawn. It's sunrise. And if you're out that early in the morning, you know that as the sun is creeping up over the horizon, there's a bit of a distortion of the light. That is, it's not crystal clear like the bright light of day. It's not dark either. It's kind of a haze where people appear as a silhouette. There's a silhouette on the shore. And how far are they? Well, we're told in the text they're about 100 yards from shore. Picture standing on one end of a football field and looking across to the other end in that kind of lighting. And add one more element to it. In those days, no corrective lenses. These adult men don't have eyeglasses for any correction in their vision they might need. So put it all together, they can see there's someone there. Can't tell who he is. Now, Jesus doesn't help by identifying himself. In fact, what he says draws no suspicions at all. He says to them, "Hey, friends, caught any fish?" Now, when he says that, he doesn't address them the normal way he would as their master speaking to his students. No, friends. It's the equivalent of us saying, "Hey, buddy, can you lend me a dime? Hey, fellas, what's going on here?" It's what strangers do as they're passing by. Well, here's what this stranger suggests to them. He says, "Once you cast your nets on the right-hand side of the boat, you'll find a catch there." Now, first, why would these guys even bother listening to a non-fisherman telling them where to fish, especially when they fished all night and they caught nothing? Now, it may be that what we have here is a miracle of sight. Jesus saw where the fish were, and he spoke in a way that gave that impression. "Hey, look, right over there on the right. Drop your nets there. That's the fish." And so maybe he did it in a dramatic form that enticed them to give it one more try. Certainly would explain that. Now, what he may have done, though, is more of a miracle of movement, where the fish were going to be wherever they dropped their net. He just told them, take it on the right, and then, by miraculous power, he drew the fish to the net. However those fish got into the net, they got there. And we're told that they caught 153 fish. First, that's a good night of fishing, especially when you struck out all night. And I got to think, who actually counts 153 fish? Well, I suppose maybe real fishermen do. That's not me. Or maybe an apostle who's making notes to one day tell the story, write it into a gospel. Someone like John. Maybe that's who counts fish. Anyway, there were 153 fish. We're told large fish. That's unusual. Every single one of them large. That suggests something supernatural was going on here. And it was too many fish, too heavy, to haul the net into the boat. So they're going to have to drag it to shore. And that's what they did. They dragged it to the shore. They're about 100 yards away. They pulled the net in. And here's the odd thing. The nets were not torn, even though you had this exceptional amount of weight pulling on the nets. Now, the last time this happened for the disciples, well, their nets were, in fact, tearing. You see, back in chapter 5 of Luke, the first time Jesus called these fishermen to be his disciples. Oh, he told them to drop their nets, and they did, and they caught a huge quantity of fish, and the nets began to tear. That was 3.5 years ago, and for these fellows, it's deja vu all over again, as the expression goes. You see, on this evening, they truly had a miraculous catch of fish. And this is a clue to the identity of who the stranger is on the shore. Because for Peter, James, and John, they've done this experience before. And thus John says, I know who that is. It's the Lord. And when Peter heard that, Peter did what you know Peter's going to do. Peter jumped overboard and swam to shore. He had to be the first one to see Jesus. Now we're told it's something of a parenthetical footnote thing that he had to first slip on his outer garment before he went swimming. He wanted to be dressed properly for Jesus. Now in your old translations, it says because he was naked. Now don't imagine these fishermen, they fish in the buff all night. No, but they do take off the heavy outer stuff so they get down to something that's cooler while they're fishing in the evening. But now it's time to put on your proper garment so you stand before Jesus. Now when they got to shore, they found that breakfast had already been prepared by Jesus himself. We're told he had a charcoal fire that was burning. He had fish on the fire. He had some bread along with it. Now he told them, come bring some of your fish. We'll add that to the fire as well. Now there's nothing beats fresh fish. I love that. But you know what could beat fresh fish? Jesus' miracle fish. I mean, Jesus had to get his fish from somewhere. Let's assume he did a miracle. And I'm thinking of the water to wine episode where the wine they had was pretty good, but Jesus' wine was even better. Well, you've got fresh fish plus Jesus fish. That's going to be a great breakfast. And I got to give you an observation here about giving, about offerings. You'll note that Jesus did not need their fish. He already had fish, had plenty of fish. And yet at the same time, he offered them the opportunity to contribute to the breakfast. I think giving works that way. We give not because God needs our stuff. He's got plenty. He's the creator of the universe. But he gives us the opportunity to give and to participate and be part of the great work that he does. Well, it came time for breakfast. And Jesus said to the disciples, come, have breakfast with me. Now that's an invitation going to be hard to resist. Fish, bread, maybe a cup of coffee, and of course, Jesus. Now there's a significance to this story that goes beyond just an opportunity to be with Jesus. This provided more evidence for the resurrection. On that Easter Sunday, the disciples, the apostles, they thought that Jesus in the room with them was just a spirit. They're looking at a ghost. So Jesus said to them, listen, have you got anything around here to eat? You got any food at all? They said, well, we've got broiled fish. And so he took a bite of the broiled fish and then asked them a question. Now, can a spirit do that? You see, he ate to show them that he was actually real and he was alive. You may recall he also had dinner with two disciples in Emmaus. And now he's having breakfast in Galilee. You know, years later when Peter was preaching to Cornelius, Peter talked about these kind of stories. Peter said that God raised Jesus from the dead and then granted that he become visible. Now, not to everyone, but to the witnesses, the ones that God chose. And these witnesses, they're the ones who ate and drank with Jesus after He rose from the dead. You see, there was a significance in Jesus eating with the disciples. You know, that also reminds me of the hope you and I have of heaven, that one day we'll be invited to sit down at the banquet table, as Jesus described it, sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. We're looking forward to that day. So perhaps on our very first day in heaven, perhaps that morning at sunrise, we'll hear Jesus say these words to us, "Come and have breakfast with me."